Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. This video is going to be a little different. Of course, my name is Zachary Nolan. Welcome to the channel. If this is your first time tuning in, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like. We'd appreciate all of that support. There we go. Yeah. Thank you so much for tuning in. Really do appreciate it. Trying to hit 1,500 subscribers. If you could help, means a lot. This video is going to be a little different than what I normally do. Normally, I just cover Winnipeg Jets content, or we cover Winnipeg Blue Bombers content, or we do random Star Wars content or something, and this is kind of a combination of our hockey content, and our Jets content and our other hockey content. But mostly, I wanted to do something different, okay? Because the playoffs was an interesting experience for me. This is the first time we have covered the playoffs with an actual whiteout party, with the Jets making the playoffs. First year, we had a channel. The Jets made the second round after sweeping the Edmonton Oilers and then getting swept by the Montreal Canadiens. We didn't have a single whiteout party or anything, but the Jets went already about a quarter of the way into the playoffs, so it wasn't like I could really step back and look at the playoffs through a bigger lens. Last year, we were able to do that, and we covered every single series. We did a little bit of a series recap, what happened. Now, this year's different. The Jets made the playoffs, but they were the first team eliminated. So what did I want to do? I wanted to kind of let people in on the thought process, and also just some overall feelings that Winnipeg Jets fans had after their team was eliminated, because we were the first team out. We were the only team to get knocked out in 5 games in the first round. Every other series went 6 or more. And since then, a lot of people admittedly zoned out. I totally understand that. I get it. Once you're out, you're like, you know what? I don't want to feel any emotion about this. We'll get back to it next year, or we'll get back to it never, because they hate True North, and I kind of understand. But this year, I kind of wanted to keep my eyes open, because there were a lot of former Jets in the playoffs. And I always like looking at former Jets in the Stanley Cup playoffs and kind of cheering for them, hoping they do well. Because even if their time in Winnipeg was short or a little bit through jaded eyes, I still want the best for them. And this year, we had a lot of new, just recently removed Winnipeg Jets in the playoffs. And they kind of panned out differently. And let's talk about that. So let's talk about some of the older Winnipeg Jets that haven't been on the team for a while. And first off, the first 2 people I wanted to mention were 2 that had very unliked runs, so shall we say, in Winnipeg, being Evander Kane and Jacob Trouba. Jacob Trouba recorded no points in the entire 7-game series between the New York Rangers and the New Jersey Devils. And while he wasn't producing anything offensively, he was doing great. He was doing fine defensively. However, the Rangers really were kind of a little bit of a broken mess in this playoff series against the Devils, and it showed. Also, too, Evander Kane. Evander Kane made the second round with the Edmonton Oilers. However, they did not reach the same heights they had reached last year, making the third round in the West Final. They were stymied in 6 games by an Edmonton Oilers team. And also, too, there's other Jets to look at, of course. Derek Forbort and the Boston Bruins flamed out spectacularly. Zach Bogosian had a very uneventful time with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Brandon Tanev made it to the second round with the Seattle Kraken. But I want to focus on the more recent ones and the ones that had success. First one is Mike Eyssimont. Now, Mike Eyssimont was an interesting case for me watching him play, because I was really excited for him. I wanted him to do well. However, I knew that Tampa was having a problem that I like to call diminishing returns. And let me talk about it. So, in a couple years back, Tampa needed to completely restructure their team. And Tampa has always had really great high-end talent, but they've lacked depth. So in the past, they went out and been like, we're gonna grab great Blake Coleman, we're gonna grab Barclay Goodrow, we're gonna get guys who can play in the bottom 6 well. And last year, they got 2 guys, they got Nick Paul and Brandon Hagel, and those guys helped propel them to the Stanley Cup final against the Colorado Avalanche. Now this year, they couldn't get those guys, so they had to go for different players. This year, it was Mikey Eyssimont and Tanner Jeannot, and they did not have as good of a time. Tanner Jeannot kind of had the wheels sputter. Mikey Eyssimont had the game-winning goal in Game 5 to keep the Tampa Bay Lightning alive against the Toronto Maple Leafs, but would fall in overtime in Game 6 to the Leafs. nonetheless. A little unfortunate, however, it did help secure Mikey Easimont a 2-year contract with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Good luck. I'm happy for it. And, of course, I have to keep my eyes out now when he comes back to Winnipeg, because you know there is going to be a tribute for him, because there's a tribute for everyone. Another other thing that we should talk about is Dave Lowry. Dave Lowry was on that same team with Brandon Tanev. He was an assistant coach, and this is going to hurt a lot of Jets fans. We talk about pushback. The Jets didn't have any pushback, and there was no pushback. There was no fight. All of the other former Winnipeg Jets coaches were connected to teams that have pushback, and I'm including Claude Noel. Claude Noel is a scout for the goddamn New Jersey Devils, and they had pushback against the New York Rangers. Yeah, it's sad, I know. Dave Lowry and the Seattle Kraken upset the former Stanley Cup champion Colorado Avalanche in 7 games in a very tight series, and then forced a Dallas Stars team to the brink of 7 games before ultimately falling in Game 7 against Peter DeVore and his Game 7 perk that means he can't lose a Game 7. And honestly, for Dave Lowry, that's a good thing for Dave, honestly. I think Dave Lowry is a solid assistant coach, and I think he's a solid assistant coach or a specialty coach. I don't think he necessarily has that voice yet for a head coach, which is ironic, because if you looked at Dave Lowry, you'd be like, oh, yeah, of course, this guy can lead a room. I haven't really got that from him. However, as a part of a group unit, he works pretty well. So good for him, honestly. Glad that he has a job with the Seattle Kraken, and that his entire career didn't sputter off after being on an underwhelming Winnipeg Jets squad. Now, the main guys I wanted to talk about were Laurent Brossoit, Paul Stastny, and Paul Maurice. I had best wishes for all of them. We'll talk about Laurent Brossoit first, because yes, he made it the furthest, but he didn't actually get to be there for the final win, shall we say. So Laurent Brossoit started off as the Vegas' starter going into the playoffs by default. The Vegas Golden Knights he was probably, I believe, their 4th goalie. They had Robin Leonard was on LTIR, Logan Thompson was injured, and I guess, now Laurent Brossoit slots in at 3, and then there's also Aiden Hill and Jonathan Quick. Laurent Brossoit proved to everybody that he was not indeed just a backup, and beat the Winnipeg Jets. Gentlemen sweep them in 5 games. Now, granted, the Winnipeg Jets did give Laurent Brossoit fits in games 1 and 3, where they both put up 4 goals or more on Laurent Brossoit. However, he was able to compose himself, and they win the series in 5. We then go to Edmonton, and Laurent Brossoit has mixed results here. He ends up getting, I believe, he makes it to Game 3 or Game 4 before getting injured. And he picks up a win, and then tragically gets injured, which is very unfortunate. I think it's a groin injury or something around the legs. He goes to stretch out for a recovery save, and just pulls something, and Aiden Hill has to go in. And the rest is history. Aiden Hill backstops the Vegas Golden Knights, who were an extremely well put together team on their own, to the Stanley Cup final, where they win the Stanley Cup over the Florida Panthers in 5 games. Shocking that Aiden Hill gets that far, but nonetheless good for him. Him and Laurent Brossoit are going to have very interesting off seasons. They're both unrestricted free agents, and Logan Thompson is still the best goalie, in my opinion, that the Vegas Golden Knights have. Is Aiden Hill possibly money? Yes. It doesn't mean he's the best goalie overall. It just means that he's really good. He can be a really clutch goalie, which he was. Now, granted, again, it feels weird. It feels really weird saying Aiden Hill is a Stanley Cup champion when I know Henrik Lundqvist, Roberto Luongo, Carey Price, and Mika Kiprusoff never got Stanley Cups. That's a weird feeling, right? It really is. But nonetheless, I get it. Laurent Brossoit, I think, is going to get a starting job with another team wherever he signs in the offseason, because there is a lot of open starter positions for, at the very least, teams in transition. Who knows? Maybe the Winnipeg Jets will bet on Laurent Brossoit. You never know, because it looks like we're not going to have Connor Hellebuyck this year. But yeah, the other two I wanted to talk about, the last two I wanted to talk about were Paul Stastny and Paul Maurice. I wanted good things for both of these. I didn't expect a damn thing from Paul Maurice early. Well, actually, we'll talk about Paul Stastny first, because my ADHD wants to go to Paul Maurice. But no, we're going to start with Paul Stastny. Paul Stastny was ring chasing with the Carolina Hurricanes, and I get it. I totally get it. Honestly, I had wanted us to trade him to a team like Carolina last year, but the core didn't let us trade him, so we lost him for nothing in the free agent market, and nobody was upset at Paul Stastny. Not a single person was angry. You don't look at that 2022 Jets team and be like, "How dare you leave us, Paul?" No, I don't care, and I get it. It's all good, Paul. But yeah, Paul Stastny only puts up 4 goals in the entire run. However, has a monumental goal, being the goal to end the New York Islanders in Game 6 in overtime from below the goal line. Gets the overtime winner, and then they go on a run. They beat the Islanders in 6. They then go and beat, who'd they beat the next round? They beat the Devils in 5. And then they go up against Florida in the conference finals and get shockingly swept. Like, it is one of the tightest sweepings since the Jets over the Oilers. They didn't even make mistakes. They just got Bobrovski'd. I don't know how to explain it. Like, literally, first game, 4 overtime classic, which at that point is crippling. When you lose a 4 overtime classic, it's crippling because you've almost lost a day of rest too. They lose a 4 overtime classic at the very end with like 14 seconds left. Game 2, they lose in overtime again while being shorthanded. Game 3, they get Bobrovsky. They lose 1-0 despite outshooting them vastly too much. And then in Game 4, Matthew Tkachuk scores with like 4 seconds left to end the series. That is destructive. So where does Paul Stastny go from here, honestly? To a team chasing a ring. I wouldn't be shocked if he tried to re-sign cheap with the Vegas Golden Knights. If they're having trouble re-signing guys, he could go to a team like Boston. He could go to a team. He could re-sign with Carolina even. I think he's going to try to do what Corey Perry, what Patrick Marleau did for a little bit. Corey Perry, what Joe Thornton did. He's going to try looking for a ring. And he's had a really good tenured career, and I totally understand that. But yeah, let's get to the big one. Paul Maurice was the story of the Eastern Conference. It was, yes, the Florida Panthers, but Paul Maurice was a driving force in that story. Paul Maurice somehow got a Panthers squad that was 1 game away from not making the playoffs, thanks to Chicago beating the fucking Penguins on the second last game of the year. He shockingly came back and helped a Panthers team come back in the series and win in 7 games from a 3-1 deficit. He then helps them coach to a 4-1 win over the Toronto Maple Leafs, sweeps his protege, shall we say, partial protege, and Rod Brindamore's Carolina Hurricanes, and then loses in 5 to the Vegas Golden Knights. And I have really a lot of it's funny. I feel like I didn't really get to say this about Paul Maurice when he signed with the Panthers. I made a short on it, and I didn't really get a chance to say this well enough with when he resigned as Winnipeg Jets head coach. I think Paul Maurice is a very good coach. It's just Paul Maurice has a shelf life, and if you can, and every coach does, but once you get to a point where the speech isn't hitting anymore, then it's time to go. And honestly, that's more on our core than it is on him. And Rick Bowness showed that sooner or later the core will descend into anarchy on their own, but you gotta try to do as much as you can when you can. Paul Maurice, I really like Paul Maurice's styles. He's good at getting a lot of offense out of his teams. His defense is a little shoddy sometimes, and he does need an elite goaltender. But I actually kind of compare him to pre-cup winning John Cooper. I see a lot of similarities in their styles. They both always show exuberant offenses. And don't think about John Cooper now with what we know now after he wins those 2 cups. Okay? Because I'll say this, I think that Paul Maurice could have won with one of those 2 cup teams that John Cooper had. But that's beside the point. Before that, the narrative was he needs an elite goalie to carry him over the way. He got one in Vasilevsky. And Paul Maurice got one in Sergei Bobrovsky. And he got really damn close. And Vegas was just a juggernaut of nature, unfortunately. If they're against the Stars, I think they win in 6. If they're against the Oilers, I think they win in 5. If they're against any other team in the West, other than the Vegas Golden Knights, which was a juggernaut of cap circumvention and roster build that was just, we are ruthless, I think he wins the cup. It's unfortunate because I really wanted Paul Maurice to do this because I wanted True North to have to sit down and stare into the abyss at Paul Maurice hoisting the Stanley Cup in his first year back since being head coach of the Winnipeg Jets and say, we were the problem. I wanted True North to see that so bad. People were hoping for his downfall from Winnipeg, and I don't agree with that. You hope for the best because because either way, he was happy with his time here. And we were happy with his time here. He got a lot out of a group. We made the 3rd round. We made the playoffs multiple times, which was the first time we'd ever done that in our franchise history. It was big. He needed just a little more. The clock struck midnight, plain and simple, on the Florida Panthers. Injuries caught up with them. Overperforming caught up with them. But I don't see overperforming as a proof of a lack of good coaching. I think overperforming can be influenced from great coaching, if that makes sense. But yeah, this is my thoughts on the playoffs through the lens of a Jets fan. It was heartbreaking to see the Vegas Golden Knights win. It was. However, there were a lot of stories that we could have saw throughout there. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it to the end of this. I know it's not always an easy listen, hearing me talk and talk and talk and talk. Thanks so much for watching. We'll have another video coming out in the next coming days about my thoughts on all of the acquisitions of last year and how they did with the Jets this year. Keep an eye out for that. Also check out our Winnipeg Blue Bombers reaction as they just defeated the Saskatchewan Roughriders last night. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.